So I am with the famous Catherine Rolt, the author of The Pain Paradox. And Catherine Rolt's book, The Pain Paradox, which, by the way, I simply adore, and I have people coming to me all the time wanting to buy multiple copies to give to people in their yoga class and people in their life because it's so eye-opening. So, Catherine, thank you. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me, darling Anne.
You're welcome, darling Catherine. Can you tell us what your book is about?
Yes, it's about understanding that our body is a feedback mechanism, and pain is part of that feedback. And unfortunately, we live in societies now where we're hypnotized into running away from our pain, every which way. We all grab onto mood altering activities rather than actually sitting with pain. So I always give this example. You know, I was born with very rare diseases. I'm made up of scaffolding, literal metal pieces that keep me being able to walk and function. Now, every single time I have pain, I know that that is my body's feedback telling me that I'm going too fast, I'm being too obstinate, I'm literally moving too fast, I'm sitting for too long. It doesn't really matter. I now know to really respect my pain. I don't medicate it unless I really have to. So pain has ended up being my best friend, but I was taught to run away from it.
I'll tell you, I think you have a wonderful expert positioning story because you haven't just experienced chronic pain. You haven't just experienced, number one, the desire to run away from pain, and then the recognition, through your own life experience that running away from pain isn't going to do you any favors. You're also trained as a specialist. Can you tell us a little bit about your training and your methodology so we understand just the basic feel of you and your framework?
So over 9 years, I trained as an integrated Chinese medical practitioner. And the joy of that is that my first job ever was a shepherdess. And I literally had 700 ewes that had been fed. This is very relevant. They had been fed with hay that was not dry enough. And so it fermented in their guts. And they all were prolapsing during the nights when I was on duty. Now, I learned very fast how miraculous nature was anyway in my childhood, but particularly looking after 700. There were 700 ewes that had never given birth before, and they were all in a panic. And if you know anything about sheep, they panic. Well, years later, I started training in this phenomenal medicine that at the heart of it, it puts us back to nature. So we also, most of us, can behave like sheep. I put my own hand up, and given half a chance, I will lie flat on my back like a sheep will, and I will just sort of panic. It won't occur to me that there are things that I can do as life's challenges come at me. I just sort of played around. And Chinese medicine at its roots, not how it's necessarily practiced now, is very similar to really the natural medicines that we have all over the world in every single philosophy or nation. And I do know why we are losing touch with the natural order of things. And that is when, as a human being, when we're challenged with things, if we cannot connect again with the natural order of things, we're going to lose our way.
Why do your readers need to connect with the natural world? How is that going to benefit them? So the title of your book is The Pain Paradox, and it's certainly about physical pain and emotional pain and spiritual pain. There's multiple pains. Why is connecting to nature, Why is that one of the sounding bells for your book? One of the things that you're encouraging people to do page after page after page? Why is it so important?
I think it's really simple. I think every single wisdom, religion, coach, everybody sooner or later comes back to a very, very basic thing that we all can choose. Those of us that have the privilege of being able to begin to choose, we have to get to know ourselves. If we want, I mean, most of the marketing out there is suggesting that most of us want a better quality of life. We want more wealth. We want more peace. We want more joy. We want more fun. We want better relationships. We want great sex. We want. The most natural, basic thing about human beings is we do continually want. And it's the natural order of things. We're hungry, so we want more food. We're thirsty, we want more, whatever it is. Now, the more we can get to know ourselves, the better quality of our life is. So it doesn't matter what the challenges are, we're actually okay to handle them. So the natural order of things, nature shows us how much more resilient we are. But, and I'll just leave it with this little tiny thing. I was with a patient the other day, or a client, and sometimes I do very eccentric things with people, and I will deliberately go walking with someone. And I was walking with this lovely woman who had had a terrible, tragic thing happen. And after a very, very few months where she behaved extraordinarily, but bravely and graciously, she sort of shouted. She wasn't shouting at me, but she was shouting, and she was saying, "For goodness sake, Catherine, I must be able to get over this grief. I'm so bored and irritated by it. Come on, what do I have to do?" So I said to her, "Would you please go up to that tree that we've just walked past and go and shout at it and tell it to bypass 2 seasons and pull itself together and just produce summer?" And she sort of stopped and looked at me, and she went, "Okay, I get it. I get it. I can't bypass this, can I? I cannot control it." And I went, "No, unless you want a homogenized next 2 months or 5 months." And she said, "The word homogenize. Oh my God, that's why our food tastes so disgusting. We're trying to make things happen instead of going with the order of nature. I cannot control this grieving, can I?" And I said, "No. And the more you do, the more you are actually going to become ill, not just mentally and appropriately full of grief, but you're going to become physically ill." And she went, "I get it. I get it."
So you structure a lot of your lessons, or the greater wisdom of integrated Chinese medicine and that framework into seasons. And when I hear you say, we have to connect to nature, I know one of the ways of connecting to nature is connecting to seasons. And what this woman was understanding for the first time is that we can't skip seasons, and that the seasons themselves have a purpose. So how does winter, as an example, how does connecting to the necessity or the presence, the natural presence of winter, how does that relate to somebody's pain or their experience in the world? Like, how do you draw that connection between winter and what's going on in a person?
Okay, so a lot of people nowadays are suffering from terrible levels of anxiety and, in a way, very understandable fear. If you're not frightened by the time you've listened to the news going on in the world, then in a way there's something disconnected. But the winter season, so every season has organs that are attached to it. And we have a sort of high time and a low time. And the very simple way of looking at this is which is contradicting a lot of stuff that's out there at the moment. But there is a very clever time for your body to eat food. So there's an old expression of eat like a king for breakfast, a prince for lunch, and a pauper for supper. Now, I didn't know till I was trained, and this is relevant to your winter question, I didn't know that actually every organ in our body has a high time and a low time. And most of us are eating when our body's organs are resting. So, of course, we're becoming bloated or overweight or having digestion issues. Now, if you go into the winter, most of us, anyway, I'll just talk about England, come sort of October, November, December, our bodies are beginning to go into hibernation. If you want to double up your anxiety, then you will get into the maelstrom of Christmas hyperactivity. You'll do more partying, more drinking, more eating, more shopping, buying, frantic activities at a time when actually your body is going, please, I've worked really hard all year. You know, I remember your darling husband last year, he suddenly said, to do with the cycles in marketing, and it was so on the money for actually what our bodies need. Now, actually, come the winter time, we need to respect our own rhythms. And most of the people that I work with now, they will put off all that Christmas hyperactivity and they will delay it until they feel stronger. And they're not going to start feeling organically stronger until the spring comes. So their anxiety can be managed differently by going into this next winter, for instance, by going, wait a minute, I don't have to have my anxieties increase. I can manage them differently. I can stop going at the rate that the world tells me I have to go to, and I can go at my own rate. And if you really sit with someone and ask them what they really want to do, they will almost always tell you they want to do some sofa surfing in the winter.
Interesting. So you're basically giving them permission to follow their natural rhythms.
Yeah.
And if they follow their natural rhythms, a lot of what ails them is going to disappear on its own. So one of the things that I've heard tell about your book, because I talk to a lot of people who've read your book, who've been impacted by your book, the surprise for a lot of people is that when you're helping people, when you're evaluating somebody and you're trying to figure out what the source of their dis-ease is or their discomfort, you're often looking at their relationships. And you're not just looking at their current relationships, you're looking at their past relationships. And these stories are often at the core of what's going on with people. And I know that people have found that very, very surprising because in Western medicine, nobody's talking about relationships. Nobody's looking for stories. They're just looking to figure out which organ is causing the problem and then shoving pills at it. Why do you think people are so surprised that their relationships are kind of the nexus of some of the stuff that's ailing them?
I think our educational systems are disconnecting people from themselves. So I think that people don't know how to have a relationship with themselves, honestly. They're very often quite shame-based. They don't live from an energetic sense of innocence. And I'm not talking religiously now. They don't have a sense of they're okay, faults and all. And so if that's the first thing that is not happening and has not been educated or supported to be of primary importance, then it's going to be a massive surprise when actually somebody comes along who goes, hold on a second, you lost. I had a lovely patient who lost their two siblings very early on in their lives. And as a direct result of that, their parents didn't know how to cope and they divorced. And when the time came for us to unravel what was really going on, you could just see the relief for that person to be allowed to go back to unfinished business. And I think it's also another simpler way sometimes of putting it, because sometimes people are visual. You know, if we all come in with a, you know, we have a territory that is a river, which has the beginning of the river, the middle of it, and the end of it. And that's our life force, that's our life's journey. Now, if at the beginning of the journey or at some point in the journey, flipping great boulders are sent into the river and the flow is sort of all over the place, then how further up the river can you're going to be affected by what's going on here? But modern life sort of somehow pushes you out into the world and expects there to be no consequences from earlier on. And what I love, and the reason why I've set out to do all of this, is that very small changes can make huge differences. I mean, you guys are runners, and I'm not claiming to know anything about running except when I used to thump around poor, unsuspecting Fulham roads in London. But I knew that if I wore the wrong shoes, I couldn't run properly. I just couldn't. But it was such a small shift in a shoe. It was the laces and we're like that. If most of my work is validating and witnessing people's previous boulders and then showing them how they can unpack the boulder, we get the bulldozer in and we actually take out the boulder, or we break it down, or there are many metaphors, but people need to be allowed to declutter their own energy, their life force, their river, their journey, and then they'll shoot off.
Yeah, I think that is why people are redefining what trauma means. I think more and more people are understanding the boulders in their river, and that it's not necessarily the big, huge, catastrophic things, but it's those stories or those events that they haven't had time to process that somehow get, block up their river, that ends up creating trouble down the road. And the trouble is physical pain and emotional pain and relationship pain and spiritual pain and all of these things that leave you feeling unwell or not functioning properly. I like the metaphor of the boulders because I really think that that's a better way of looking at trauma, which is such a common theme right now. People are really trying to explore that for themselves and identify what the trauma was in the past that has somehow clogged up their river. Don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, Anne, this is another really funny thing, but I don't want to make it a gender because I've had enough men to know that it's not just women. So many people open their cupboards. If one of you or I turn to each other or to Walt and we go, we've got a black tie event in 2 weeks' time, and the king of haberdashery or whatever is going to be there, and we both go, oh, we've always wanted to meet the king of haberdashery. My God, we've got to look our best. Well, sooner or later, we will be talking to each other and we'll be going, what are we going to wear? And we'll open our cupboards and we will not see that we actually already have the perfect whatever it is, because most of our cupboards, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically, and literally, are full. So we can't see what we have. We can't see who we are. And when we have the boulders in our rivers, we haven't got a clue. And we need someone to say, Anne, you've got the most perfect dress. Do you remember you wore it, blah, 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 and you put that pink sash and you've got those sexy shoes, and, you know, the king of haberdashery would be just so in heaven and in awe of you. Well, you know, we need people a bit like me that comes along and makes it fun. We open the cupboard and we go, well, sweetheart, no wonder your joy is not there. You've got baked bean tins full of trauma, insidious traumas, then some of them not big. I mean, I wrote a blog the other day about some sexual violation that took place with me. And I absolutely had the guts to do it because it's completely cleared from my energy field. And I knew it would help other people. And the medical person who shouldn't have behaved in the way that he did was obviously a very unwell person. And he lost his licenses and he was caught and blah, blah, blah. 7 people, Anne, wrote me just on one little tiny blog and said, "What that happened to me." What? Well, every single one of them are so-called functional people who didn't think there was anything wrong. And yet, when it was written out there, they went, oh, I have, that's been stuffed in my cupboard. And I went, yes. Has it been affecting me? Yes, it has. Yes, it stops the flow.
When I think of you, I think of mission-driven. You are a mission-driven author, right? You're a mission-driven person, but it shows up in your in what you wanted to accomplish with this book. So first and foremost, that is where you came to the table writing this book. I know the reach that you wanted to have. I know the message that you have. How would you know, like, part of it is, as you said, you know, if you connect to the natural rhythms, if you connect to nature, if you connect to natural rhythms, if you understand the boulders that are stuck in your river, then you're going to have a more joyful, more pain-free existence, be it emotional, physical, or spiritual pain. Do you think I'm landing on your mission statement, or would you modify it somehow?
I mean, I guess, and this is not mine at all. This is pinched from other people that were huge metaphysical philosophers out there. You know, I think that if we can come to terms with pain, then I think suffering can become optional. And I guess I long for people to know that there are more solutions than actually the problems. And I think we're living in a world where people are being, it's like problems are like petrol. Petrol is being thrown over people and then it's being lit. The petrol is being lit. And I wanted to do the opposite of that. So I love showing people what is right with them in the midst of them going, I'm such a mess. I can't stop crying. I'm just panic stricken. And I go, well, what's going on? And they tell me, and I go, well, I feel panic stricken now. That's totally appropriate. And they go, is it? So there's not something wrong with me on top of being panic stricken. I go, no, that's what's right with you. You're supposed to be panic stricken. Now let's find out what we can do about it. So I don't know. And it's you and Walt and many other really clever people know how to, you know, make sound bites out of my passion.
Really, it's really hard to make sound bites out of a much bigger passion. It really is. But it's the essence of what me as an outsider gets from your stories and your philosophy and how you approach people and how you approach yourself. And I really do love how your focus is on what is right with you and that your pain is teaching you something, it's telling you something, and that you're not crazy. I mean, what I hear again and again from your stories is you are not crazy. There is a reason for this, even if medical establishment hasn't pinpointed why this is occurring in your body or in your soul. There is a reason for it. And it's your body's brilliant way of telling you to wake up and look for the cause so you can process it and move on and lighten your load. So having a book out in the world is an opportunity to reach people who haven't met you yet, or who can't necessarily afford to work with you in a program or one-on-one. But if somebody reads your book and they want to know how they can work with you on a deeper level, how would they do that? What's the next step for a reader?
Well, what I wanted, and I'm learning, what I wanted was I wanted what my patients told me they needed. So I worked in clinical practice for over 40 years. And consistently, what people were really telling me they wanted was they wanted a menu. And I was thinking, a menu, what does that look like? And I literally, unfortunately, I haven't got a menu right now, but what people want who have got to the point where they know that life's not working for them, what they want is to be treated with enough respect to be able to get back to choosing. So, if there's a book, they want to be able to read that, and they want to be able to prod this Catherine Rolt. Who is she? Is she real? Does she really have integrity? Does she have a clue what I'm going through? Is she relevant? Now, if that works, they can then go on to a series of kind of, in a way, low-hanging fruit. There's courses, but there's a menu of how you would like to work with me. That's what I wanted, and that's what seems to be working with people. So there's a spirit pain connection program, which is only 7 weeks, and then there are 3 extra months of consolidating. So there's many different ways you can work with me individually, you can do the courses, but what I wanted was people being able to have a taste of what is possible, because it is a different philosophy. My roots, the way I was trained, you give me all your symptoms and I will find out the roots of what's going on, because the opposite of those roots and the opposite of those problems is potential. Well, Western medicine is completely the opposite. Give me the symptoms, I'm going to give you a pill, I'm going to give you a quick fix. And it doesn't matter who I pay, it's going to be the same routine. I'm going to be given a quick fix. And sometimes that's great, that works. But more often than not, it doesn't work because it hasn't really given the patient or the client the information they really need about themselves. So that's how I wanted it. So if people want to speak to me individually and have quite intense experiences with me, because it's an intense journey for themselves, then they can do that. Or they can do these individual courses that I've deliberately built. There's 5 31-day courses around the energy of the seasons.
I will say this about you: you are uncanny. You are uncanny. You are right in saying that when somebody reads a book, they're looking to determine if this person is credible, if this person knows what they're talking about, sometimes just professionally, sometimes both personally and professionally. They're looking to see, if they're the real deal. And that's, you know, that's what we have to set up in a book like this. We have to set that up so people can smell you and determine if you're relevant to them or not. Because some people would read it and they're like, yeah, that's not how I see the world, and they would go, and that's wonderful. That's what we want in a book. But I will say this, something that hopefully people can see from the stories that you've told in this book, that you are uncanny. And what you're looking at, most, let's call them wellness practitioners, wouldn't even think to look there, wouldn't even think to assess it that way. So I hope that shows in your stories. But just knowing you personally, what you see, what you witness is mind bending. And you do have that perception that most people don't have, I believe, or they're not in touch with. You are very in tune to other people and the small shifts in energy. And I think it's a phenomenal skill set that I only hope, if we even capture 20% of that in your book, it would be a great job.
I'm looking at a very brilliant woman, though. So I think that we've gone way over 20%, by the way. I give you absolutely 100% credit for your brilliance, Donna Young.